Hello, and today I'm going to share with you a sewing adventure that didn't go entirely according to plan. It actually feels a little exposing because I made a mistake really early on. I knew I'd made a mistake, but I didn't know what it was. So I just carried on and I only realised what it probably was, quite late on in the process. And when you're putting your sewing adventures out there on the internet, it is kind of tempting to edit out bits that don't go right because you worry about the judgment of others. But I know that those of you who watch me are always so supportive. The only little exceptions I had were on the walkaway dress, but I think that's because it's the pros and cons, isn't it? You want your video to be seen by lots of people, but with that comes the odd comment. I must say, I can't really imagine watching somebody making a dress and taking to the internet to tell them it looks terrible on them. I think sometimes people might forget there is a human being at the other end. But I'm assuming that all of you watching today are my lovely, kind and loyal audience. And actually, I think it's good to show the mistakes as well, because I learned from my mistakes, and if you also learned from my mistakes, none of us have to make those same mistakes again. Very quiet, Rabbit. Are you all right down there? There. So the pattern that I'm going to make today looks like quite a simple one and should have been quite simple. It's this one, and what made me do it, apart from the fact it was free, was that I wore the trousers that I made from this pattern all summer. They were so comfortable and pretty. So I thought I really want a nice pair of swishy long culottes for the winter too. And I'm always drawn to colours and prints, and I thought I ought to be sensible and make a neutral coloured pair of swishy trousers, swishy pants, as you would say in America. Pants are underwear here. Never quite get used to pants. And I was just thinking, will I make that pattern again? But that seemed maybe a bit boring for the rest of you. I was just thinking that when I got a message on my Instagram from Jess Stories. I'll kind of put her, I don't know if she'll thank me for this. I'll put her Instagram there because she makes absolutely fabulous clothes. I'm in awe of her sewing ability. And she sent me, don't snort that again. She sent me details of this pattern, and I thought, that's it. That's the very pattern that I've been wanting to do, because it's got that kind of decorative close-fitting panel skirt yokes that were such a feature of the 30s, and wide swishy trousers, because of course in the 1930s it still wasn't characteristic for women to wear trousers. So they are actually described on the pattern as sports trousers or kind of tennis trousers. So I thought, yes, that's the very thing I want. Just arrived in perfect timing. And then I went up to London's Fabric District and I found some gorgeous charcoal grey double weight pure wool crepe, a bit extravagant, but one, they are all struggling in that Fabric District. It's only about 10 minutes walk from me, and I like them to keep going. It's not like a saint. I just bought fabric for the sake of others. It's not entirely true. They also have some lovely fabrics. I also justified it to myself in that hopefully I will be wearing these pants, trousers for the rest of my life. So I'll get on and show you what I did. And if you're thinking, I wonder when this horrendous mistake takes place, right at the very start. It just continues. I did a mock-up which showed me that the yoke pattern pieces were too large for the pants or trouser leg pieces, but I looked and looked at the pattern pieces, and I was absolutely sure that I had taped all the little bits together properly, so I just couldn't see where I had gone wrong and why the pattern pieces weren't fitting. So I decided it would be safest to cut out the pattern pieces as they were, with the yoke pieces too large, because I thought too large is better than too small, and maybe I've just missed something that's going to become apparent later on. But you can see here with those yoke pieces, they just seem to be too large to fit onto the top of the trouser or pants legs as they should. And I'm just showing you the piece of paper, the piece of paper that the pattern layout is shown on, and you can see those yoke pieces are supposed to fit exactly onto the top of the trouser legs, and yet they're just too wide, and it was a complete mystery to me. If you look at this pattern piece, you can see how much sellotape went into the making of it, how many different bits there were on different sheets of paper. It was really quite a puzzle putting it together, but I'm absolutely sure that I pieced it together correctly. And the back yoke pattern piece is pretty well the same size as the front yoke pattern piece, which also went to convince me that I couldn't have pieced all those bits of paper together incorrectly. I started wondering when I pieced the pattern together if I hadn't missed a piece of paper out of the leg part, if it was blank with no printing on it. So at this point I just kind of kept going and cut out the pocket flap, and then I went round the edges of all the pattern pieces with my overlocker, because I'm such an overlocker expert now, or I should say serger for Americans. I can't decide which word I like best actually, overlocker or serger. And that little list is the instructions, brief and to the point. And here I am still puzzling over those yoke pieces, which are definitely higher than the crotch in the diagram. And sure enough, when I sort of wrap them around myself, they're way too big, as they were in the mock-up. Actually, I'm not sure why I do mock-ups if I ignore the evidence they present me with. And this is the moment the penny finally dropped. See, the supplied pattern just said an extra newspaper snippet. I'm justifying myself getting defensive, but it didn't actually draw attention to that extra newspaper snippet being important or vital in any way. But now I can only think that this is what happened, that the blouse, which also comes with the pattern, which I also printed out and taped together, and trouser legs had to be printed at a different percentage to the yokes. So when I printed everything out, I thought it would all need to be scaled up to the same percentage. So once I had got the pants legs, trouser legs and the main blouse pieces to the right size on the percentage scale, I thought all the pieces would be sized up to the same percentage. Because those yoke pleat pieces are too big all round, yet the perfect shape, I think that additional newspaper snippet was there to show you that the yoke pieces needed to be printed out to a different scale. I'm still not certain. If somebody told me there was another explanation, I'd believe them. But I think that's what happened to me. So, was I going to go back and reprint those yoke pieces? No, because I had a nightmare with the printing. So the pattern printed out with these kind of little bits everywhere. There are pages with just a kind of tiny wee little snippet of something. I was an entire day doing this jigsaw puzzle, and so many different little bits went into actually managing to create a pattern piece. So one, that took ages. And then the second reason I'm not going to go back and do that is that the pattern needed to be sized up in Adobe Acrobat Reader. Now, I don't have the Adobe Suite. I would love to have the Adobe Suite, but it's quite expensive. Should I ever have any spare money, I would like to buy a proper camera rather than filming everything on my phone. So I'd like the Adobe Suite, but I can't afford it. So when I saw it had to be scaled up in Acrobat Reader and I looked on Adobe, it did say have a 7-day free trial. So I thought, aha, I'll just download it, my 7-day free trial, print it out and cancel the trial, which I knew is a bit naughty, but you know, I told myself I will one day have the Adobe Suite. So I downloaded it, printed out everything, and then tried to cancel a free trial and found that I couldn't cancel it. And I was now signed up to an annual subscription. So, of course, then you start Googling. Rather than find out, oh, this is how you kind of cancel your free trial, I just found the internet was full of other people saying, help, help, I can't cancel the trial. Adobe offers no way to cancel. Usually on your phone you can cancel subscriptions, but with Adobe you couldn't. And a phone number they put up so that you can cancel actually comes back as this number doesn't exist. So it was really stressful. And as I say, when I Googled the problem, all I got was lots and lots and lots of other people having the same problem. So ultimately, I actually had to phone my bank and explain. So I won't be. Definitely, I'm not going back down that nightmare route to print out that yoke. What I'm going to do is fit the trousers pants on me, and because I actually do like the pattern, I will then redraw a pattern piece for future use because I would quite like to make the culottes. So I just decided to literally, as you can see, cut off the edges of the pattern to make it fit, and to use the excess at the top to form a facing. And then it was just a case of stitching all the seams, the yoke pieces to the legs, and joining the side seams and around the centre of the leg seams and around the crotch. It's leaving an opening on the left side of the culottes for a fastening. And here I'm measuring the length of the pocket and the pocket flap, which just aligns with the top edge of that yoke panel. And I'm marking with a heat dissolvable fabric pen. And from my 2 large yoke pieces, I've cut what looks like a square, but is actually just a rectangle, but sort of squarish piece for the pocket flap, and also 2 strips for the pocket opening of much the same size. And then the pocket flap is just doubled over, and you stitch each side and then open it up to create the flap, making sure the corners are nice and sharp, and then giving it a press. And then the 2 strips for the pocket opening are folded in half wrong sides together and pressed. And then those strips are aligned raw edge to raw edge along that marking that I made for the top of the pocket. And then I stitched those strips along their centres, both along the top and along the bottom. And then I cut between these strips along the marking made for the pocket. And when I get about ½ an inch from the edge, I snip to make a little triangle up to the line of the stitching. and then you turn the flap and these strips inside out, and those little triangles at the ends are then stitched down in place, and there is your neatened pocket flap. And now I just have to create the pocket bag to fit inside that opening. And then the pocket bag is stitched first to the top edge of the opening and then to the lower edge. Even though the pattern actually calls for a combination of hooks and eyes and snap fastenings, I decided to put in buttons and bound buttonholes because I just love bound buttonholes. Not so much sewing them, but I love the look of them. And I'm just showing you my various markers because I thought this pencil would be brilliant, but actually that kind of triangle of tailor's chalk was actually much more effective. I began by measuring around the button, and you also have to be careful to measure, if it's a chunky button, to add that measurement of the depth on as well. But these mother of pearl buttons I'm using are quite thin. And there is a way of working out the size of the buttonholes with mathematics, for which I recommend Retro Claws bound buttonhole tutorial. I have just done so many bound buttonholes, I tend to do it by eye, and to be honest, they're quite forgiving size-wise. I've never had buttons either pop out or not go through. So I'm just marking my rectangles there with the centres, and you can probably see I've curved in. They're very high-waisted, these culottes, so I've kind of curved in the waist area there. And then you just do little stitches to mark through those markings, and that's just so that you can see the markings on each side of your fabric. Then I cut patches for my two bound buttonholes, and again there is mathematics you can apply to this, or you can just do it by eye as you can see that I'm doing. And then you fold over your patch to find the centre, and then you put a pin through the centre of your patch and through the centre of your buttonhole. I'm just pinning that patch to my buttonhole, and then I'll take it to the machine, and the stitches that I made then serve as a marking to stitch through, and you use little stitches on your machine, leaving the needle in at the corners. And it's a kind of compromise. Obviously, if you use a contrast thread, then you can see your stitches much easier, but they are hellish to get out once you've stitched over them with these tiny machine stitches. So I just turned my sewing machine light bulb on and squinted hard to see my stitch markings. Then you snip carefully down the centre line and snip little triangles at the corners before turning the patch through to the wrong side of your fabric, and then you work it with your fingers to create nice neat rectangular edges. And this part of the process is really fiddly. And then at the ironing board you create the welts for your bound buttonhole so that they meet nicely in the centre, and then I usually just tack them in place with a few little diagonal stitches so that they don't warp when you sew the buttonhole around the edges. And of course when you do stitch, you make sure to catch in those little triangles at the ends firmly. And then, having stitched the facing in place, I put pins through the corners of my bound buttonhole so that I could mark that buttonhole on the facing side as well. Stitch the edges of the facing part of my bound buttonhole, and then stitch these really pretty mother of pearl buttons on the opposite sides to finish. So here they are, and I must admit I have run up the white flag as regards sizing up pattern pieces on a printer. It didn't go well with the Janet Arnold dress, even though I had it professionally done, and obviously it didn't go very well this time either. It's like one of those whodunits where once you know the answer, the clue is so obvious, but at the time not so much. I'm wearing the culottes here with a 1920s ruffle silk blouse and a slightly crazy 1940s tilt hat, a bit sort of Mad Hatterish kind of hat. But I'm really pleased with the culottes, and if I decided that I didn't really want to go out in a Mad Hatter hat, this Fair Isle knit from Emmy Design Sweden is much more of the kind of thing that I could pop down to the supermarket in, and I'm wearing it with a 1940s Bakelite red dog brooch. And I think these culottes will get a lot of wear. You can see they're going to be very wearable, and I also tried them on with my short sleeve pink Knitting for Victory top that I showed you last week, and a cute little 30s style skull cap for my Queen of Hearts look. And you can see in the pattern the pocket is on the front, and I actually decided to put it on the back because I tend to think it's not a very good idea to draw attention with anything flappy on my lower tummy area. So on the back I think it looks rather cute. And you can see that although these swishy 1930s culottes have a kind of lovely vintage look to them because I've styled them in that vintage way, they would actually look good styled with modern garments too. So all's well that ends well. I think they're cute, and I really want to make them in the slightly shorter culottes version. Actually, in my less than tidy living room, you might have seen some fabric hanging up, which is destined to become a late winter, early spring outfit that I'll be showing you soon. Oh, I love you too. And another reason I wanted to make these 30s swishy long culottes is I have an exciting project coming up with the lovely Janine Spendlove and the wonderful sewing pattern company Jill and Dawn, who are super. And we're going to be, myself and Janine, are going to be making a 40s blouse, but with a pattern they come with different versions of a design. So it's going to be really fun. We've both chosen 2 different versions to make, so you'll be able to see all versions of this blouse. And that's going to come up soon, and now I have my long culottes that will go with those blouses. And yeah, lots coming up this year, so please consider subscribing if you haven't already and liking this video, and I will see you next week. Bye. Goodbye. Bye from Pixie, and bye. Bye.